In this video, we'll be replacing the AC condenser in this Mazda CX-9. It's going to be located behind your radiator. You will need to drain and remove your radiator for access. Now before you start any work on your AC condenser, you're going to want to bring your vehicle to a local shop and have them evacuate and or remove your remaining air conditioning fluid. So we're going to start by opening our radiator cap. You only want to do this when your car is cool or your radiator fluid in this here is cool to the touch. Go ahead and open it up. We can remove that cap fully and set that cap aside. All right, so underneath our vehicle, we're going to locate our drain plug here. It's going to be a 12 millimeter. We'll go ahead and open that up. Now, before you do this, you want to have some kind of spill protection down, drip pads or a pan for the collection of your old antifreeze. So we have that set up. So go ahead and open this now. What I'm actually going to do is bring our pan a little higher. Now with our radiator fully drained, we can go ahead and put our plug back in. Now we can torque down our drain plug to 20 foot-pounds. So now while we're underneath here, we still have a few lines to disconnect before we can start to remove our radiator. So we're going to grab our hose clamps here with a long pair of needle nose. We've done this one. We'll move over a little further. We have one more hose clamp here on our other transmission line. All right, we have one last one right here. Now what we may end up doing is removing this plastic fender liner once we need to get to this hose, but for right now we can move the hose clamp without removing that. Let's get the hose clamp out of the way, and now we'll come back and remove our lines. So we're going to start with this line here. All right, if you have vehicles anything like ours, these hoses have been on a while, so we'll use a pair of needle nose here just to spin that hose if we can and break that seal. All right, so we've got that hose loosened up. Just go ahead and pull that back. Again, there should be a little residual fluid in here, so be prepared. Some kind of collection down. Because we're working under here, we're just going to put a rag in here to absorb a few drips that are left. And we'll move on with our other lines. All right, so the next line we're going to go for is our lower radiator hose here, the big one. Again, we're going to grab it with a pair of pliers, see if we can just break that connection there, or that seal. Just give it a little spin and pull it back. All right, and we are free with no fluid drip. We can take that hose and just pull it back behind this cross member just to keep it out of our way, right there. So what we do now is actually remove these two push clips so we can move this panel down a little bit more and get a little more access in there. If you want to take this panel entirely off, you're going to have 3 8mm or Phillips head screws right across the front. For us, that's good enough. We'll just lower it and pull it down right about here. And over on this side, we have another coolant line. Grab it with a pair of pliers, see if we can get a twist. And we'll rotate that right off. And drain any residual coolant. Again, once we're done with this line and it has drained, we'll take it, put it right up over that cross member to the other side by our AC compressor, and just keep it out of our way. So now we have 2 transmission lines left on our radiator. We're going to go ahead and disconnect those now. There will be transmission fluid here that's going to come out, so be prepared for that. So here's our transmission line. Let's see if we can get this to spin. Break that seal. Now if you are using a pair of pliers or anything like this, try not to chew up the hose. I'm just trying to get it to rotate. And again, you should be prepared for some transmission fluid to come out of here. So now our radiator fan is held in on the bottom by 2 bolts. They're going to be 10mm. We have one here and one on the other side. We're going to start with this one here. These are pretty rusted, but while we're underneath, we'll see if we can tackle these from here. Yep, kind of what I expected, that they would break. All right, now across the other way, we have another 10mm bolt on the bottom of our fan assembly. And the same thing. So now on the driver's side, we have a little opening in front of our transmission. If we follow that straight up here, we have our transmission line bolted to our fan assembly. It's going to be a 10mm. We're going to see if we can get that bolt out. And just like the other ones, it broke. All right, so now if we come straight down from there, we have one more 10mm on that same line into the fan assembly. And again, broken. So now right up here, we have a couple of white hose clamps. This one's actually broken on one side, but you would come around the front here and pop this clip open. But now, because we're broken here on this side, we can just open that up and remove our line. So now if you follow your transmission line up and back, you'll see that line is clipped into the fan assembly. So we're going to pop these clips out of the fan assembly. If you are able to open these clips and pop the line out, you can do that. All right, we have 2 more bolts holding in our fan assembly right underneath here. They're going to be 10 millimeter. Oh, we have 1. So our transmission line is clipped into the fan assembly. Those clips are extremely hard to get to. If you can't get to them, what we're going to do is give you an option of following that line up right here and disconnecting this line, which will be remove your hose clamp. And then remove your line right here. Now when we take the fan assembly out, this hose will come with it. So now we're going to remove our air intake, or our fresh air intake tube, which will lead into our air filter box. We're going to start with these 2 10 millimeter bolts. From here, we're going to move down a little bit. You'll see a bracket, little rubber isolator. We'll remove that bolt. So now we're going to remove our air intake, or our filter box here. We're going to remove it all the way up to this band clamp. First thing we're going to do is remove this clip here, or this plug. There's going to be a little red tab on the bottom, which we're going to pull out first. That's going to be your lock. Once you've popped that lock out, reach underneath there, squeeze it, and remove that plug. If you follow this line straight down, there's going to be a clip into that box holding that harness in place. We'll remove that clip, and we can set this harness aside. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go right over here to our band clamp. We're going to loosen that up. You can see it's either a Phillips or a 10 millimeter. We'll use the 10 so we're not stripping it. So now holding our air filter box, we have in 2 clips here. We'll go ahead and push those out of the way. So now what we can do is we can lift up our cover here. We have a couple of tabs in the front. We're going to lift up the back side, pull those tabs out, and because we undid our band clamp back here, we can go ahead now and just spin this cover right off. So now from here, if you decide to, you can take out your air filter. We're actually just going to leave it right in. We're going to grab a hold of this bottom box, pull it straight up. So the front intake that we loosened up will come up with it, so try not to block that. There's 2 pins on the bottom set in rubber grommets that we're trying to release now. So just grab a hold of it and firm pressure up. And we can take this whole assembly right out of the vehicle. There are your 2 pins. So now we're up top. We've taken out our intake. We're going to start to remove a few more hoses. We're going to have to take out our fan assembly first. So top radiator hose is in the way. Clear a needle nose pliers, get that hose clamp moved. So on our upper radiator hose here, we're just going to give that a little twist and pull that out. All right, so the next hose we have here is right on top. Again, move our hose clamp. So this upper hose here, you see, just broke right off really easily. Now we're going to end up replacing the radiator, so that's not a big deal, but we will end up needing to get this portion out of our hose. We'll probably use a small pick tool or some random tools there to get that out. Okay, now moving across the top, we have our relay box. Go ahead, the 10 millimeter, remove that. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove our overflow here from our overflow tank. We're going to take it out with the radiator, but first we're going to come in here with a small pocket screwdriver and pop this clip up, push in, and then if we follow this line up here, that's right where we're going to remove it. So squeeze that hose clamp, give this a little twist, and pull that right off. So now on our fan assembly we have this large harness coming across. It has a few panel clips held into it. We're going to remove these clips and separate that harness. Alright, so we're going to do this all the way across. This harness here on the top does come in and go inside the grill in front of the radiator, so just be careful of this separate harness here. We can remove this plug. What we're doing is removing everything from our fan assembly, because the next step will be to remove the fan assembly. Or this clip here is actually broken, but we'll go ahead and remove it and we'll replace it with something at the end, potentially. We don't have those. Now right down here. So we have one more here, and then this plug as well. Now this plug should slide out. We're going to unplug or unclip this here. And now we can unplug this harness. So now off of this harness, we have this plug right here. We'll remove that. All right, now across the top we have 4 10 millimeter bolts holding our fan in place. We'll take those out now. So now we're going to take out our fan assembly, probably from the driver's side. To do that, we're going to need a little bit more room, so we're going to take this bracket right off. It's going to be a 10 millimeter. Assembly pretty much ready to come out over here. I'm just going to continue to keep working it up. Turn it sideways. Watch that big harness. Lift it right out. So now on the top panel here, right underneath where our intake was, we have a plastic cover. We have a matching one on the passenger side. I'm going to come in here with a flathead screwdriver, come right in here and just push straight back. Okay, so now with the covers off, we're going to remove these rubber isolators. Just lift those right up and off. And the same on the passenger side. So now for a little bit more room on the passenger side of our radiator, we're going to follow that large harness down to one final clip right here. It might give us a little bit extra room that we need to move this side of the radiator. Now with the rubber isolators removed from the top of the radiator, you can see your radiator is pretty free. We also have to remember we have this hose attached to it still. So we're going to lean our radiator in. And there will be matching isolators on the bottom of the radiator. So we're going to grab a hold of that and just lift it up. About an inch, 2 inches to get out of those isolators on both sides. And then the same way we took out the fan assembly, we'll remove the radiator. Up and out through the driver's side. Now our relay assembly here and this large harness want to keep moving. So I'll just drop that relay assembly down in there and work our radiator out. Now again, even though you've drained your radiator, you will have some coolant dripping from your radiator, so just be prepared with some kind of spill protection. Need a little bit more movement inwards, so we're going to remove this clip here on this large harness. Now we have a little bit more inward movement, and we can start to rotate and lift our radiator up and out. Get that harness around the bottom radiator inlet or outlet and lift the radiator out. So in through our bumper, there'll be 2 bolts holding in our condenser. So this bolt is going to be a 10 millimeter. And you can see one on the passenger side that we're on now. When we're done with this one, we'll go straight across to the other side. And there'll be one other 10 millimeter there. And now directly across to the driver's side, we have our other bolt. It's again 10 millimeter. So now you can see that our condenser is loose. We're still held in up on these brackets here that we just undid. So we're going to try and get that bracket free. Just pull our condenser forward. Okay, so there is our bracket. What we were just working around is this notch here and the one in the bottom. If you look inside here, this plastic piece here was set into this notch, stopping us from pulling it straight up. Alright, so we have to get to the lines on the passenger side of our condenser, but you can see our condenser is still stuck in place. We have 2 matching pins on the bottom stuck in rubber isolators. So we're going to lift this up out of the isolators. Now the isolators may come with the pins, which is fine. We're going to lift it up. Now the bottom AC line is kind of catching, so we're going to try and just lift that up the best we can and get it out of those isolated spots on the bottom. And we'll shift the condenser as much as we can without doing damage to the lines to the driver's side. So now to give us a little bit more room, we're actually going to take this AC line out with the condenser. We're going to take off this 10mm nut. Now from here, we're going to separate this top piece from our line. Just going to lift that straight up, and we can gently move this out of the way. Now you have this line that will come up off of this stud. From here, we're going to come right down, lift this up gently, and we're going to get right to this top line bolt here. Top line here is going to be held in by a 10mm. We'll remove that. All right, so with our bolt removed, we can separate our line from our condenser. Now there is an O-ring in here, giving us a little trouble. So we're going to use a panel tool very gently, not to do any damage to the O-ring, just separate the line. And now what we're going to do is lift, because this line is still connected to our condenser. We're going to lift up and off this post, and then we can work it out the driver's side. So now we're going to take our AC condenser out the driver's side here. We have to pay attention to this line that we disconnected and the line that is still connected. So what we'll do is start to work that over to this side. Watch out for our harness, and get that top line on the other side of our bottom line. And while watching the line that we left connected to not do any damage, we rotate it right out. So the way we took out our old condenser was with this line attached. So we're going to need to swap this line over to our new condenser. We'll leave this plugged until we're ready to do so. It's going to be a 10mm. There's our line. We can now discard our old condenser. So now we're going to take our old line, put it into our new condenser. We're going to lift this up, unplug it. Now there is an O-ring on our old line. You want to make sure that O-ring is in good shape. If it is, we're going to push it right into place. And put our 10mm back in. Okay, we're going to leave the top plug in. We're ready to take this to the vehicle. All right, so we're going to lower down our condenser. Again, we're going to direct our hard line into place. We're not doing damage over there. We'll lower our condenser into place. Now our new condenser came with new hardware, new rubber isolators and new brackets on top and bottom, so you don't have to transfer those over. All right, once you have your condenser in the vehicle, we're then going to connect our top line in the vehicle. So now we're going to connect our top line. Okay, so now we can unplug it. You want to make sure you don't get any debris inside that line, which is why we kept it plugged for as long as possible. Now we're going to direct our top line into position here. Push in that O-ring. And we'll line up our 10mm, bolt it in. Okay, so to line up our 10mm, we're going to have to twist the line and the condenser to get that to line up. right, now with our top and bottom line connected, we can locate the condenser into its isolators. So now what we're going to do is line up our bottom isolators, which also means we have to line up our AC lines. There are little plastic cutouts in here that we're going to need to match them up to. So there's two ways to go about this. Trying to do it with the isolators on the condenser, and then trying to do it with the isolators off of the condenser. Which I think we're going to do. So we're going to line up the isolators on the condenser. So to do that, we're going to need to take the two lines here and sit them all the way into their cutouts, so all the way to the passenger side. Angle your isolator into the pocket in the vehicle and push down to seat those isolators down. Next, we're going to have to push the condenser forward towards the front of the vehicle and lock our top brackets in place so we can reinstall the bolts. Okay, and our brackets are just going to get pushed into place and locked in. So now we're going to align our hard line here onto this stud and just seat it down as far as you can get it. And we'll get it ready to reassemble. But first, we'll go and put our condenser back into place 100%. So these brackets here, you're just going to push them in to the front of the vehicle as hard as you can to lock them in under the plastic tabs. Same thing here, push them straight in, hard as you can to lock them into the tabs. Alright, so we can reconnect our hard line here to the rest of the vehicle. Again, there's an O-ring on the bottom side of this. We're going to want to make sure that's in good shape. If everything looks good, we're just going to reposition it and push it straight down. Make sure it's fully seated. We can put our nut back on. We're going to give these two a squeeze together as we tighten it down. We're going to lower our new radiator into place. Our rubber isolators remained in the vehicle, so we don't need to transfer those in. Just going to lower in our radiator. Get it underneath that harness, going across the hood area and past this harness here. Once you get your radiator dropped down into your engine bay, we're going to locate our bottom two pins into their rubber isolators. So take a little trial and error to find those pins. Once you find them, press straight down to lock them into position. You'll know you've got them if your two top pins line up with these cutouts here where our isolators on the top go. And looks like we're in place. So now that we removed this tube with our old radiator, we're going to need to remove it and put it on our new radiator. So we'll move that hose clamp. And just break that off. So the tube broke inside of the hose here. So we're going to need to remove the rest of that plastic out of this line. So now we can reconnect this hose onto our new radiator. Just going to push that all the way in place with a pair of long needle nose. We'll take that hose clamp and we'll put it in place. We're actually going to take the hose clamp and angle it inwards. So if we have to do this again, that clamp is a little easier to get to. Just like that. Now if we follow that hose up a little bit here, we have this clip that will clip it in here. We're not actually going to clip that in place just yet. What we're going to do is work on a few more of our top lines across the top here. Alright, so if we push our radiator towards the front of the vehicle, our little pins here are going to catch our isolators there. We're going to press those down into place. We're going to do that both left and right. And then we're going to put our covers back on. Covers just going to go just like that, push straight back. All right, so now we're ready to put our fan assembly in. Again, it's going to go in almost at a 90-degree angle. Lower it down and rotate it into place. While doing this, you want to be very careful of your radiator and the fins on the radiator. You don't want to do any damage. All right, now with your fan in the engine compartment, we're actually going to put our 4 bolts back up top. Our old bolts broke, so we'll be replacing them with new bolts. All right, so we're going to start across the top, putting our bolts in to hold our fan assembly to our radiator. They're going to be 10 millimeter. So now we're going to reconnect to this hose here. Bring this back in. Again, these clips for us were broken, but we will put it back into that clip. Push it back all the way on, and then reseat our hose clamp. All right, now from here we can start to reconnect our large harness. Just going to put in our clips. We'll re-plug this in here. All right, and some of our clips holding our harness actually broke. So we'll start to put these back in where the clips are still good, and we'll come back and address the areas that aren't. Here we can re-plug this in. This harness goes to our intake box, so we'll leave this hanging for now. We'll do this one more clip here. And while we're right here, we can put our upper radiator hose back on. Bring this hose over. Seat it all the way back in. And put our hose clamp back into position. Okay, so moving along on our harness, put it back into place, put the clips back into place. All right, so then our relay box is going to go right up here on top. Then this gray plug here is going to get plugged back in right there. All right, so now our coolant hose here is going to get clipped right back in. Follow this line up to our fill. Slide that all the way back on and put our hose clamp back into place. So now looking in from the top down, we have a little bit of access here for our transmission line. But if you remember, the bolt for our transmission line actually broke off in the fan assembly. So what we're going to do is use a wire tie right here, hold that line in place. Okay, so now we're going to put our air filter box back in place. We're going to line up our 2 pins into the 2 rubber grommets. We're going to push straight down. Easy way to find those is align your front air intake tube with the 2 bolts best you can. That should get you right about into the rubber grommets down below. Now if you need to, you can remove your air filter and push straight down. Give it a tiny little tug up, make sure it doesn't come loose. Looks good. Put our air filter back in place. And we're going to put our 2 bolts back in front here and our bracket to our air box back in. And this bracket with this speed nut on the bottom is going to go underneath, and this will go on top. All right, so our air filter top, the 3 tabs are going to get lined up there. We're going to drop it down. And we're going to lower our tube onto our lid here, line up these notches, and press it together. Once our 3 tabs are in, our tube is in, fully seated, what we're going to actually do is lock down our band clamp in the back. All right, so in the back here, we're actually going to flip up our clips and lock down our lid. Just going to pull them up and press them in. Next, we're going to take our plug with our lock. We're going to press the plug in until we hear a click. And then we're going to push in on our red lock. We follow this harness down. We have a little cable clip here. It's going to get pushed down into the lid. Okay, so now starting on the driver's side, we're going to work our way across. We have our lower radiator hose that we moved out of our way. We'll just put it back up into position. And we'll set that all the way on. And move our hose clamp back on. All right, so now continuing along, we're going to reinstall our transmission line and make sure this line's seated all the way in. And put our band clamp, our hose clamp back in place. And then if we follow that transmission line straight back, we have the one more that we disconnected here. Just push that back up into place. And put our hose clamp back. All right, so next we have another line here. We have a little notch on our plastic from our radiator. We're going to seat that tube all the way in to that notch and move our band clamp back into place. All right, and moving down the radiator, we have another transmission line here. Make sure we're all the way in and put our hose clamp back. And our last line, right after the transmission line. All right, and now we can move our band clamp back into position. Now we can move our hose clamp into position. Okay. And now that we removed our inner fender liner, we can go ahead and put that back in. And for us, it's just going to be these two push clips. If you did remove the entire panel, go ahead and put your bolts back in. Here's one clip, and coming in, attaching our inner fender liner to our wheel well liner, our other last clip. All right, so now across the bottom we have 4 bolts holding our fan assembly to our radiator. Our bolts broke, so we'll be replacing them with new bolts. If your bolts did break on the old radiator, you have new nuts in the back with your new radiator assembly. So we're not going to fully tighten these down until we get all 4 of them in, because we might need to shift the assembly slightly. So we'll move on to the next one. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next one. And our last bolt. All right, and now that we have all 4 of them installed, we can actually come back and tighten these down. And our last bolt right here. So now with your radiator installed and all your hoses lined up and put back in place, we're going to put a funnel in our radiator coolant fill, and we're going to pour a little coolant in there. We're going to try and fill up our radiator the best we can with the vehicle off. You're going to see 2 lines. One's going to be a low and one's going to be a full. We're going to try and get it to the full line. So what you want to do is find your 2 lines here on the side. You can see you have a low and a full. You're going to want to fill your radiator or your coolant up to the full line. Once you've done that, go ahead and remove your funnel. Put your cap back on. Twist it to lock. And you're going to want to run your vehicle. Run it to operating temperature. Once you've done that, let the vehicle cool down. Make sure this cap is cool to the touch before you do anything else with your coolant. If at that point, once you've run your vehicle and it's cooled down, and you are in the low or anywhere in between these 2 lines, go ahead and open your cap and fill back up until you're full. Now that you've installed your air conditioning condenser, What you want to do is bring your vehicle back to a local shop and have them refill your air conditioning refrigerant, and you're done.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.